Okay, so next up, I have actually had the unique pleasure of working with this next CEO for the last 5 years, and it has been a lot of fun working with him. He's a person who was initially shy to state a really big vision, but in the last 24 months, I counted, he has released 24 separate press releases, announcements of really huge endeavors that his company is taking on. So with that, I would like to welcome Naheed Kurji to the stage, please. Hi. I was actually going to comment on your socks, that it has, in the last 24 months, the thing that has changed is your hair. You have cooler socks, but now you're rocking it sockless. So it threw me off my game here.
From Toronto to California, I got to change it up. And the haircut is all an optical illusion.
There you go.
I'm losing it from the top, so I just said, let's trim it and let's trick people.
It's innovative, right?
That's right.
There you go. There you go. Well, I was, when I was initially preparing for our conversation, which I'm so excited about, I went through all of your press releases, and just the sheer amount of things that you guys have launched has been absolutely incredible. And I got curious as to what was the initial catalyst. And what I saw was that 24 months ago, you guys launched the Ligand Express.
Right.
Almost, I think maybe even like 26 months ago. And it's a cloud-based platform that revolutionizes drug discovery. So I did the looking backward on that Express. Let's look forward.
Great.
24 years from today.
Okay.
What does the world of Cyclica really look like? What is the impact that you've created?
We just said our 10-year decade, and now you're asking me to go an extra 14 years ahead of that. So for everybody's benefit in the audience and online, Cyclica is a Toronto-based biotech company, and we're thinking differently about how to empower scientists with a cloud-based computational biophysics and AI-augmented drug discovery platform, and then changing the paradigm about how medicines are discovered. And we can spend a little bit more time on that. But the next 10 years for us is democratizing the access of technology to empower scientists and early-stage biotech companies to help them take more steps in the right direction. And by doing that, in the next 10 years, our goal is to participate in the formation or the partnership of over 1,000 biotech companies to create the next biotech pipeline, or let's put it differently with a rhyme, to provide big pharma with sightline to the future pipeline of drug discovery. So decentralizing the discovery of medicines by bringing it onto our platform and then feeding that into the clinic.
I've just been so impressed by that sheer number. So how did you come up with the fact that it's going to be 1,000 companies? How did you get to that place of knowing that this is truly what the industry needs?
Right. So what the industry needs now is a new way of thinking about innovation in drug discovery. Big pharma is exceptionally good at clinical trials, the infrastructure and the capabilities that they have in clinical trials, and to bring molecules to drugs and then to patients. Where they need some support, and this is where biotech companies, research institutions, nonprofit organizations are thriving, is in innovation in drug discovery. What those institutions and organizations don't have is access to capital to be able to afford fair market value of a platform just like Big Pharma would be able to. And so that's where we thought about, well, the scientific problem merits a new solution. How can we be creative in how we approach biotech companies? And so that's where we have taken equity positions in dozens of companies to date, formed joint ventures with many others. And what we realized was there was a need. Our technology was scalable enough and adding substantial enough value downstream to support kind of a compression of drug discovery time without compromising quality. And that we had a fantastic team that was able to then either create or tell a compelling story to existing companies and be like, this is what we can do for you. And so where 1,000 companies comes from was a little bit poetic, in terms of 10-year plan, 1,000 companies. But then also each individual biotech company has a 4 to 5% success rate. So we worked our math, did our model, looked at our equity positions that we're looking to take, and how can we be a multi-billion-dollar company?
Yeah.
There's 1,000 companies.
So did I understand it correctly, and you mentioned this just now, is that you're taking equity positions in the companies that you're forming, and that you even created an incubator of sorts?
Correct. So one of the exciting things that we're going to talk about today is, in addition to taking equity positions, creating companies. And so we've created a number of companies. Most recently, we formed a joint venture with the Translational Medicine Accelerator, TMA, out of Boston, to create the Rare Disease Medicine Accelerator, which will focus on creating hundreds of companies dedicated to rare diseases. And then today, one of my very good friends and partners from ATAI Life Sciences and Cyclica formed Entheogenics Biosciences, which we announced in November of 2019. And Entheogenics, as we'll hear more about from Srini, is focused on creating better psilocybin for mental health disease.
Why was it so important for you to be able to focus on rare diseases and not just necessarily go after the big things that are likely going to be easier for you to win out?
10,000 rare orphan neglected diseases. 8 to 10% of the population suffers from it. 95% don't have access to medication. It requires a spark of innovation, a new way of thinking. An N of 1 is the future, and so let's not just talk about it, let's do it.
Great. So maybe we can bring Srini up to the stage, and you can introduce the partnership with ATAI Life Sciences. Srini, come on up.
All right. Thank you.
Srini, we are so excited to be able to welcome you to this innovative stage, if you will. And the partnership that you and Naheed have formed has been very fascinating. Naheed, maybe you can actually, let's take it back. How did you guys meet?
You take that one.
Yeah, I'll take that one. This is an exercise or study in serendipity, quite frankly. So I joined ATAI in April. There was an AI, machine learning and drug discovery conference in London, actually, at the end of May. And Naheed was actually emceeing this conference. So, we kind of had a little bit of chit-chat throughout the conference, but, obviously he was pretty busy. I don't know how it came up, but it turned out we had flights roughly at the same time, so we decided to take an Uber together. And that's really where it all kind of kicked off. And we found that we had a lot of interests in common, a lot of background in common, certainly a very profound interest in mental health. And at the end of that cab ride, it was pretty obvious it wasn't really a question of if we're going to form a partnership, but really what kind of partnership it would be.
So it all came together in a really serendipitous cab ride.
Yes.
So from a cab ride, I believe that was in May of last year, and now fast forwarding 6 months, what does the partnership really look like?
The partnership is the aggregation of two companies that are dedicated to mental health, thinking innovatively about what's necessary to actually make demonstrable strides in the right direction there. What ATAI Life Sciences has exceptional value in is deep expertise and passion and capabilities in mental health. And what Cyclica brings to the table is a robust, validated computational platform supported by deep experimental and computational science. And so by bringing those two things together, unlike any other organization that we know of today, we're able to ask different questions about what is mental health, and how can we approach it with a drastically avant-garde strategy based on an avant-garde platform.
I love that word avant-garde because you're never going to use that in a healthcare setting, in something like this. You just don't hear that. So what makes this avant-garde?
Well, I mean, there's a couple of different things. Frankly, even targeting neuroscience, when this whole thing started a couple of years ago, could have been considered pretty avant-garde, right? There's a lot of companies that have left that space, certainly a lot of larger companies that have left that space, the drug development space, there was a marked absence of innovation there, right? So we're talking about the fundamental antidepressant drugs have been around forever, right? I mean, they were serendipitous themselves, the discovery of those compounds. And yeah, there's been tweaks, there's been sort of improvements along the way, but fundamentally there were no real changes. And that's really what was, that was really the genesis of ATAI and one of the main sort of the co-genesis company, Compass. It was experience with psychedelic compounds and the profound efficacy that was seen there, plus all this more recent literature suggesting that there's, again, profound efficacy in depression. That was the basis for this. And there's a real passion amongst the founders to get psilocybin out, but more broadly to get, meaningfully differentiated therapies out to these patients that are in need. I mean, we think about depression, everybody. I mean, I'm sure if I asked everybody in the room to raise their hands, everybody's got some experience, personal or one step removed with depression. There's still this huge unmet need. There's so many people that have treatment-resistant depression. Yeah. We need new therapies, and it's not just these Me Too's. It's something that is fundamentally revolutionary there that we need.
So if you're looking out into a couple of years. I won't go 24 years on you guys, but what are these demonstrable strides that you're hoping to make in mental health together?
Well, let me jump in on that because I think it's important to provide some context. So again, there's this recent push on psychedelic compounds and their efficacy in depression. And of course, psilocybin is something that we're developing. And then there's the other angle that we're looking at, which is a non-psychedelic rapid-acting antidepressant. So we really do want to look at both sides of it. The challenges with psilocybin are one of the key challenges, actually, in terms of being able to deploy it broadly, is the fact that the psychedelic experience is relatively protracted, right? It's on the order of 6 hours. And so these patients have to be brought into a psychiatrist's office, and they basically have to be watched, monitored for on the order of 6 to 8 hours. That is, considering the sheer number of treatment-resistant depression patients out there, that's fine. You're going to address a lot of patients. What we want to do, however, in the context of entheogenics is find compounds fundamentally that are much shorter in their psychedelic effect. And that's really a key point. So now we can fit into existing treatment paradigms, right? So having someone come into a psychiatrist's office and basically be watched, monitored for on the order of 2 hours, that's already an existing model. So we can kind of leverage that. We can get this out to a lot more people, right? That's really a key thing for me.
Yeah, and but it sounds like everyone's condition is really different. So to develop all of these compounds would take. It takes a long time just to develop one, let alone many. So how does this partnership enable you to do that?
Yeah, so I'll let Srini talk about the partnership, but just taking a quick step back, every patient is going to interact differently with drugs, whether it be for mental health, whether it be for lupus, or for some form of cancer. And so the world of structural pharmacogenomics, understanding how genetic variations in somebody's proteome or how molecules interact with the key elements that are linked to disease and how that's different between people, that's a big space. And that's something that we have integrated within our overall computational platform, is to move beyond the paradigm of designing drugs for proteins and now designing drugs for patients. And that can be enabled computationally. Now, there's no magic to this. It's still very difficult. But again, it's about reducing cycle times, reducing the amount of effort that a scientist has to do in trial and error. And now brought to mental health, this is something that's particularly very exciting.
Yeah, so again, what was the objective, right? What was the objective of entheogenics, or the conception around it? Again, is to find these molecules that are better suited to commercial deployment fundamentally, right? So there's a whole bunch of factors that go into that. Naheed mentioned the proteomic interaction. One of the challenges in neuroscience is that dirty drugs tend to work better, right? So when you have this sort of reductionist approach, you're saying, all right, well, this is the receptor that drives this drug's efficacy. Invariably, you see reduced levels of efficacy. So, for example, again, psilocybin being a perfect example of this. Psilocybin, we think of it as hitting a particular serotonin receptor. Well, it hits a bunch of other serotonin receptors, it hits a bunch of other receptors. We want to recapitulate that pharmacology because we know that it works from an antidepressant perspective, but we want to clean up certain aspects of it and shorten the effect. So this platform is uniquely suited for that particular project, right? Because we want to hit across many different receptors. We want to keep that fundamental profile. We just want to make some additional changes to the molecule. And so this particular approach that Cyclica's got, I mean, at the very minimum is 12 months that we're saving. Realistically, it's closer to 18 months, maybe even as much as 24 months that we're going to be saving.
So patients will be able to access this at least 2 years or 18 months sooner than they would otherwise. And I think that is a wonderful perspective to have, that it's not just about drug discovery for the sake of it. It's not just about creating 1,000 companies, but it's making sure that patients who have rare diseases, who would not have been who may not have been paid attention to by the large companies are now getting attention because of partnerships like this that are enabling them to do so.
That's right. And I just want to leave with one closing remark. So you said a bunch of nice words about myself and Cyclica coming up. You know, every year for the past few years, I've been invited to say something on stage. And I just want to say to Katya and the folks that are in the audience, I see Unity as well, you guys are exceptional. You know, you've enabled entrepreneurs to think boldly about healthcare. And that's not an easy thing to do, and you provided them the resources, the support, and the energy to actually go about it. So thank you.
Thank you so much. You guys fuel us just as much as you think we fuel you. Thank you for all the work that you do.
Thanks.